Good afternoon. I think that the protocol would have already been established, and so it's my duty now to recognize it and continue in the splendid manner that the speakers and presenters before me would have done. I think it is very important for me to be here as the guest speaker, particularly because I am only 16 years old, and because I think it will be important for me to speak directly to the scholarship recipients, because it is always better to speak to a Frenchman in French than in Spanish. But in doing the research for this, I came across a poem in a book written by a Joan Robinson entitled Alexander Hamilton, Nevis in the Time of Hamilton, His Contribution to His Adopted Country and Nevisian Legacy. And there's a poem written there in the cover entitled A Young Alexander, which was written by Millicent Byron and privately published back in 1970. Miss Byron, of course, would have perished on the Christina disaster in that same year. But the poem reads, young Alexander splashed in the surf on the laughing shore of the quaint old Nevis town named after unlucky Charles Stuart. Young Alexander traced on the wooden pier and climbed the coconut trees that fringed the laughing shore. Young Alexander was seen no more tracing along the laughing shore, years after he was found helping to write the American Constitution. I wonder if he ever remembered the laughing shore. But the message I want the scholarship recipients to take from that poem is, think of young Alexander Hamilton and think of yourself now. What opportunities would Alexander Hamilton have at that particular point in time, during slavery and during a time when children born out of wedlock would have been the dregs of society? Think of it as that way. And compare yourself now to the technological age that we are facing in the 21st century, and think of the legacy that you can leave as a young person in Nevis, St. Kitts Nevis, the Caribbean, and to a greater extent the world. But what I want to draw to our attention is there's an incongruous increase in the cost of education. But as long as there are initiatives to help the funding of students who require assistance to complete their education goals, we are on the right path in terms of our human resource development here in Nevis. And as long as you have good human resources, you have a good economy. Forget the sugar, forget the oil. As long as your people are satisfied and as long as your people have the skills necessary to ensure that your workforce is trained and properly trained, you're on a good path. But for young people, it is a totally different case. Our young people are not working yet. Well, most of our young people are not fully working. But our young people now have to look at how they can advance themselves in the next 5 or 10 years. What can you do? What can you do now so that your future may be bright and prosperous? That starts at home. You have to be active in the activities in your home. That's the first thing that young people have to do. If you don't behave at home, or if you don't do chores at home, then you're never going to do anything that is of a valuable contribution to society. It all begins at home. And be it ever so humble, there's never a place like home. But what we have to also look at is your behavior in the community. If you're not a good person in the community, you can always be a good person in the home, but your behavior in the community is also a direct reflection of yourself. And then we have to look at your behavior in school, young people. Because as long as your behavior in school is bad, whether or not your behavior in the community is good, your bad behavior will always be the one that shows up on your resume, It will always be the one that shows up everywhere you go. But we also have to look at the country itself. As long as you have a negative impact on the whole country, then it means that you're not going to make a positive contribution entirely, as long as you have a negative impact on the country. And in that, you might have realized that I've come out with 4 key stakeholders required for the development of a young person. The 4 are the young person, him or herself. That is very important. As long as the young person is not willing to advance themselves, no matter who tries, that person will never advance in this world. The second key stakeholder is the parents and the guardians. As long as parents don't pay attention to what their children do and how their children do it, then we will find that our children won't even care about what they do. And there is a popular calypso from the Lashing Dogs in the Virgin Islands. Children steal TVs and the parents sit at home and watch the TV. And as long as you do that, you're only making true the adage, the harborer is worse than the thief. And I'm not calling anyone a thief, but I'm using it in the context so that I can draw to your attention what it means to be a good person. The third stakeholder is the community. It takes a community to raise a child. I think that is very important, because as long as you step out of your house, you're the responsibility of the community. And as long as the community is not looking out for you, then it means then that you, in terms of your outlook on the entire country, and in terms of what you're going to do to impact the country, will either be bad based on what the community does, or it will be good based on what the community does also. And I think it is important for the communities also to play an important role. And let us also look at the adage, good fences, good neighbors make. And as long as your neighbor knows that there are boundaries to be adhered to, then I think our young people also will be developed in the way that they should. And let me not draw my attention to the fourth stakeholder at this point in time. I want to read a 6-step plan for young people to help to advance themselves. The first one is understanding the problem. Realizing that our human resources have been underdeveloped for far too long, and the only solution for young people is by strategic planning and enforcement. The second one is devising a plan, collaborating with everyone to ensure that the plan operates with no interruptions. The third one is carrying out the plan. And this is to ensure that all persons, including the young person, the parent, the community, and the government, are included in the plan for development. The fourth one is assessing all results and coming to a decision of whether the plan failed or succeeded. The fifth one is devising a new plan if the original one had failed. Collaborating once again with all stakeholders to ensure that all persons are included in the plan for development. And the last one is reap the benefits. And I think that is the most important one for young people. Because I think a famous quote from Aristotle is, "The roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet." Well, you know, for this type of case, I think it is okay to get diabetes, okay? But let's not go any further on that. I think young people also need to look at the external implications. We live on an island, in an archipelago of islands known as the Nhcs. Those in the Nhcs live in an archipelago of islands known as the CARICOM. CARICOM exists in an archipelago of islands known as the entire Caribbean. We have all those people, 5.5 million people exactly to be competing with. But let us forget all that. The only person you are supposed to be competing with is yourself. As long as you feel good here in your heart about what you have done, don't worry about what others say. Because if it is your best, it is always your best. Don't listen to what other people have to say. Because there are things in this world that we have to face with. And one of them is called jealousy. And if jealousy can ruin a big person's life, young people, it can doom yours. And we have to look at that. But what is important now is that all the scholarship recipients are in high school. Think of yourself as not lucky, but deserving. Think of yourself as that person out of a school of 800 students or 300 students, as the case may be, who would have been deserving enough to get that scholarship, and cherish it. Cherish it like you cherish the $600 iPhone. Cherish it like how you cherish your life. Because at the end of the day, what determines where you end up in life is how you do in school. In this type of world, if you cannot produce results now that look good, in this type of world that we live in that is so challenging and so dependent on qualifications, you will not make it far in this world. And it is very true. And I know it might hurt what I'm saying, but sometimes the truth is more melodious than the untruth. But I'm going to also read from the same book that I started out with. For many years, the Alexander Hamilton Scholarship was held to assist local secondary school students. Marion and Bill Trott instigated the tea, in fact. They were keepers of the Hamilton mementos and promoter of Hamilton's legacy, which was celebrated in 1957 with a colorful festival to mark the 200th anniversary of his birth. His birth right here on these grounds. And so let the whole sentimental value of being here inspire you and draw out of you that which is good and noble. The late Mel Henville played the part of Hamilton. Through the years, Hamilton College in Clinton, New York, named for Hamilton, awarded scholarships to 3 divisions: Carlton Descent, Sherry Truss, and Keithley Woolard. You never know where you're going to end up. This book might have to be edited and your name might be there in the next 10 or 20 years. We know that these recipients receive scholarships in part because of the association with Hamilton's birthplace, which is Nevis. So that is another thing that is contributing to your development. Consider yourself very lucky to be born on an island 36 square miles with just over 12,000 people, and compare yourself to Jamaica or Trinidad or Guyana. Think of yourself, think of the ratio. You're 1 in 12,000 people. How easy it is for you to get a scholarship. Think of someone in Jamaica, 1 in 2 million people. You must think of that as well when you're doing what you're doing. In 1957, his great-great-grandson Lawrence Hamilton provided funding and helped Nivisions to establish the blind workshop, which benefited many sightless Nivisions. Therefore, we have to agree that although his life was cut short by the 1804 duel and he never returned to Nevis, he did in fact leave a legacy which has benefited many Nevisians. And so young people, and the older ones in the audience as well, and those who will view this, the only question I want to ask you, and I want to let rest on your mind for the entire weekend is, what legacy do you plan on leaving? That is a very important question. What legacy do you plan on leaving? If you're thinking that it's going to be a good legacy, I say kudos. But if you're unsure at this point in time, I think that as long as you're in high school, it is high time that you make up your mind in terms of what you want to do in life. Because if you make up your mind in the earlies, you'll have more time to change your mind. Thank you very much.